Walt, another big week in the autonomy markets. Kodiak's going public. Lyft's going across the pond, expanding to Europe. Nuro's going to land of the rising sun, expanding to Japan. Aurora's getting ready to launch drive route operations this month. Tesla, we got a little bit of fake news. Perhaps they're not going to launch in June. But most importantly, this week, you were my old stomping grounds of LA. Is this Walt the director? What did you learn out there?
It was great visiting LA, Grayson, one of my favorite cities, your former home, I think, for a period of time. It was a really busy day. I'm kind of worn out. Have definitely new observations on the kind of Waymo experience as it exists in LA, the need to get to highways. Have some observations on a couple of the companies that are doing fleet management for Waymo in LA. Have some observations on visiting with Coco, which we'll get to later, which does food delivery for Uber Eats using robots that are moving towards autonomy. And of course, we did have a little fun, spent a dinner with a bunch of TV and media folk on the roof of the I think it's called the Santa Monica proper, which was a lovely and enlightening evening discussing the concerns that at least that industry has about AI.
Last week, you said that you were on your 00 top secret mission. Did your friend and partner at Lightshed, the Netflix bull, Rich Greenfield, join you?
That was part of the primary reason of the trip, is to get a bunch of technology and media folk together for this dinner to discuss kind of how AI is changing their future. You know, everyone's got their own concerns. And, you know, it's understandable how in the media world, films are going to be able to be made at a much lower cost. There was a lot of debate on, you know, can AI originate great films? Can it be Quentin Tarantino creating this great film? So it was a good, healthy discussion. And you can really see how AI is touching industries across the board.
It's touching industries. James Cameron even came out and said you got to lower the price to make a movie by 50%. That's the media business. Now, we're in the autonomy business. I'm curious, Walt. Being a good steward of the autonomy markets, did you take out your app and show them how to and start putting people in Waymo rides at the dinner?
These people were very well versed in Waymo and using it. They did have, in some cases, different experiences than I did. For example, I found the pricing to be less than UberX when we were comparing like rides. But some of the local LA residents were telling me at times, when the wait times get to 20 or 25 minutes, it's been more expensive for them. I think it was a shared experience in terms of the cleanliness and the feel of the car. It feels like a driver. It's definitely, like I mentioned on my last trip to San Francisco, feels more aggressive in the driving. So that's good. I brought up, I didn't really have this conversation about the length of the rides, but that was an issue, right? Meaning that they're not using the highways. So a ride that Google Maps told me should have been 25 minutes ended up being 40 minutes because we passed by entryways onto the highway that is just not doing now. So I think it will, hopefully in the near future, because it's got the toll tags and what have you on there. But it's certainly one of the unlocks. That's not something that anyone mentioned. I think the residents in LA that I talked to were very happy and perceive this as a premium experience relative to Uber.
For an Angelino or an individual who lives in one of the three Bs, Brentwood, Bel Air, or Beverly Hills, you don't really leave your area. So you never go on the highway. That's a dirty little secret. When you live in LA, you live in your little compartment area. So the Waymo unlock works there. Do you feel that Waymo's starting to become part of the LA culture?
I mean, I think it's in the moment still a bit of a tourist attraction, even within the people that live there, meaning that one person I talked to said that this was like a reward that they would provide to their child who was doing schoolwork or whatever, where they would use the Waymo to take them to get ice cream, and that was the reward. So it's, you know, it's still, I think, in the novelty stage, but the perception is, again, clearly that it's high quality, which is why it's a bit puzzling when I had these rides in the middle of the day that they were pricing like a $35 or $5 ride or so, whether it was Uber or Lyft. We checked both apps, was, you know, 10, 15% cheaper on the Waymo One app.
The curiosity back when I co-chaired the Autonomous Task Force in City Beverly Hills that we always joked about, at some point these autonomous vehicles become TMZ tour buses. Any chatter about that actually becoming a reality when you were out there?
We didn't really talk about that. I mean, I think people understand the functionality and, you know, do I buy that next car more so than it being a tourist trap. The revenue opportunity in Grayson is not, you know, tourist rides like that. It's getting people to use this as their everyday transportation for sure.
That and unlocking LAX. To me, that's the big game changer there. When you're out there, you're going around, you're double O Walt. You visit a lot of the Waymo depots. What did you uncover? What did you learn?
I mean, it was interesting. I was surprised at the lack of cleaning facilities that were there. Again, every ride I took in LA and the feedback I got from the residents were the rides, the Jags are a clean, positive experience. People were joking, like, is there cameras in there watching to see if someone leaves some litter that then needs to get sent back to the depot? But getting back to your question, I saw a terawatt depot, 30 chargers, a lot of cars in there getting charged, a lot of activity in and out of the lot. I didn't see one car getting clean in the moments that I were there. Went to another larger depot that appeared to be more for maintenance. It was, I think, run by Transdev. You could see, tags on top of the cars. Some had to be recalibrated if it was a certain color. A different color was for some maintenance, whether it was a flat tire or whatever it was. A lot of cars there, like two different stories, like one on the upper deck, then there's a lower deck, and then there's an inside, I think, where a large garage where the maintenance was happening. But again, not like a production line of cars coming in and getting thoroughly cleaned. No cars getting cleaned on the outside. I think maybe one guy was polishing up a car a little bit, but it didn't give me the sense of like it being like a professional, production quality fleet manager as I would envision where the industry needs to get to at some point.
When do you think Waymo gets there, and do they have to get there to really truly scale?
I don't even know if it's about Waymo, because I don't think Waymo or Uber really want to touch this business. So it's, I think when a third party evolves that can do this stuff and turn these cars around more quickly than what appeared to in terms of the number of cars that were parked in the lot. I mean, the thing that struck me is I was seeing all these cars in these lots, especially in the lot that they were doing maintenance. And we're talking about Austin having 35 cars and servicing the whole city. We believe, I don't know if we know this for a fact, but we believe with 35 or maybe 50 cars. When I see the number of cars that were awaiting maintenance or perhaps cleaning in some of these depots, it seems like there should have been more activity in terms of cars in and out there.
Out of curiosity, how many vehicles did you count at these depots?
I didn't really count them. We put some pictures on Twitter, but like, again, the charging depot at Terawatt, you could see those were cars getting charged. And once they were charged, someone would unplug them and they'd be on their way. I think the Transdev was a bit different, where there's probably, 30, 40 cars upstairs, another 20 or 30 cars downstairs. So that's a decent number, I think, overall. And I don't know how many other depots like this exist. Certainly, in order to have the cars in the right location when the peak hour occurs, you're going to have locations like this where you can handle 20 or 30 cars in a moment for charging or for cleaning in multiple areas of the city.
Yeah, I mean, based on what you uncovered on your journey, I'm going to go on the record and say I believe the fleet's over 100 vehicles in LA. Would you think that's fair?
It would have to be, because there's, when we were out and about, there was obviously lots of cars on the road. But, if you want to try and maximize it, I would think that the inventory, there would have been more activity in terms of getting that stuff. But again, it's one point in time. It's hard to criticize them. And again, this is still an early stage company. Even though Waymo is further along than other autonomy companies out there, just look at their cars. I mean, they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a car. They're not at the point of maximizing the efficiency in terms of getting the price of the car down and the maintenance and fleet management of the car down. And to repeat what I said before, I don't think they want to do this, right? So someone will evolve and say, hey, we're going to turn these cars around and fix them very quickly. And maybe it'll be an offshoot of an existing enterprise business or local garages that can handle 5 or 10 cars here and there. We'll just have to see how that market evolves. But it's a very important piece in the overall puzzle for sure. And certainly something that we spend a lot of time on here on Autonomy Markets.
It's an important piece of the puzzle, and a model could emerge in the future where Waymo no longer owns the asset, very similar to Kodiak, where their customers are owning the trucks. This week, Kodiak filed to go public in a $2.5 billion SPAC with a $100 million pipe. It's a big moment in autonomy markets. What do you make of it?
Getting money, especially in what's been a volatile market, is certainly very important. It's $100 million in the pipe. We'll see how much more they get as the SPAC process continues, depending on how redemptions work there. That's impressive, not to say nothing about getting money. But the 100 truck order, that's to me like the real news, right? I mean, there's 100 trucks on order for an existing customer that's clearly happy. How many times do we see, a technology company, hey, we do a trial and you see some autonomous car with safety driver in, and then it lasts for 3 or 6 months and then it just expires, right? Here's a a revenue paying order done in the Permian Basin that has now been followed up by a 100 truck order. Like that is impressive. The presentation overall that Kodiak delivers, I think very detailed in providing metrics about how they can generate revenue and introducing a new thing, which is per hour stats, which gave us a lot of opportunity to really conceptualize how to put together a revenue and profit opportunity for Kodiak and how they're putting this business together.
Kodiak currently has 750 hours of paid commercial driverless hours under their belt. Aurora, as of recording this podcast on April 17th, has 0 hours. Over time, this is going to take, I would say, years. Does that become a metric in the industry that everybody looks towards?
I mean, we'll see. And you're right. And there's also a large military contract that they had for development work as well at Kodiak. But in terms of the paid hours, I mean, paid miles is also something that's going to be very interesting. Paid hours to me is incrementally interesting because when I've talked to fleet managers that run their business and are paying drivers now, they're formulating their business based on a per hour basis because that's the relative cost of the driver that's in the truck. They're not paying that truck driver per miles, and there's different. This can equate different type of applications if something's driving 15 or 20 miles an hour versus whatever 45, 50. And I think I've heard in the past some criticisms of Kodiak. Oh, their trucks don't drive that fast. I'm like, I don't know. I've seen videos of the Permian Basin that look pretty fast to me. And in this presentation, they specifically cited the assumption of an average speed of 45 miles an hour overall, which I think is obviously a reasonable time frame. So whether per hour becomes the new metrics that everyone should follow, I don't know. I mean, typically in other industries, you gravitate to the stat that everyone reports. Can Kodiak effectively bully others into reporting per hour stats because it might make Kodiak look better relative to their peers? I don't know that either. Like, we'll have to see how that plays out. To me, the bigger question that investors continue to have right now is just, does the product work? And there's no better validation of whether a product works or not than being able to put on your, income statement revenue that someone actually paid. Because, you can see letters of intent and trials where someone's like, sure, we'll let these cars operate at this location, and then it doesn't follow through in revenue. When you're actually getting paid for it, and then you're getting follow-on orders, that's where, to use maybe a pun, the rubber hits the road, or rubber meets the road.
It validates the Kodiak driver. You started with a small order, and then you went to a 100 truck order, and then perhaps you go to even a large order. It validates the driver, and it validates the opportunity in oil and gas. And when I look at the oil and gas market, so Kodiak's now in the Permian Basin, which is West Texas and New Mexico. The other opportunity for oil and gas is in North Dakota. And the Kodiak driver can operate in inclement weather. Perhaps they end up growing a very big oil and gas business over time.
For sure. The weather thing is also an interesting one, and I think we'll get into that later as it relates to kind of next step for Aurora and where they are in their timing. But yeah, I mean, it was good. The other thing that was entertaining in terms of the presentation is, they were looking at valuation. When you have no revenue and no profitability with the comps, like the valuation is just more of like, oh, Waymo is valued at this number, and Aurora is valued at this number, and like, okay, so we have trucks, we have a similar service, and you can get us at a discount because it's just a discount to the overall capitalizations of these other and limited comparables that are in the market.
One of the interesting things in the investor presentation that really stood out to me is that Kodiak's going to offer two models to the market from a business perspective. They're going to do a per mile license fee, or they're going to do a per vehicle license fee. To me, this kind of reminds me of the early days of cellular, where you had your minutes, then you had your rollover minutes, and you were free to use it. And then obviously we moved to the unlimited plans. Could that be where all this is going to merge to, is the per vehicle license fee, so you can use it all the time, get all the utilization out of it?
Grayson, I just don't know. I've when we were in Fort Worth for Forward Fort Worth, I had an opportunity to speak to a lot of people within the industry. There was a lot of interesting opinions on this. It's recently spent time with Bot Auto, and their view is the end customer just wants their goods delivered at a lower price than they're delivering today, and have some belief that it's going to be reliable going forward because they don't have to worry about sourcing drivers. But in their case, like, they're doing the middle mile. They are then, I assume, contracting with someone like JB Hunt to do last mile. And the customer never sees that. They just know that the goods are getting delivered from A to B, as opposed to if you sell a truck or a purchase on a truck, like, does the customer have to set up some facility that deals with an autonomous truck showing up at their facility? Like, where does service start and end? And then, to your question, how do you price that, relative to how historical contracts are getting priced? I don't know. And to me, I'm more focused on, does the technology work, right? That is first and foremost, because none of these pricing schemes ultimately matter unless you can get driver out and deliver the product safely. From there, if we believe that one guy has ability to price differently, though, like, that's not differentiated. Like, you can change how you price your technology. I get it. There's, like, you can't, if you have one type of relationship with an OEM versus another. You can't if you don't have last mile figured out versus another guy. So yeah, it's not that easy, but I'm less concerned with, how it ultimately gets priced. That will figure itself out. I'm more concerned with, who gets the technology to work.
We're going to find out by the end of the year. Kodiak's technology is clearly working because they're operating drive route. Aurora is going to go drive route, and also Bot Auto is going drive route by the end of the year. When you look at all these technologies, and staying on the Kodiak theme here for a minute, Kodiak doesn't need HD maps. They operate without them, where Aurora does need HD maps. Wave doesn't need HD maps. Tesla doesn't need HD maps. Waymo does. Could HD maps become a relic of the past?
You can't help but wonder when you hear from Wave or Wabi or Tesla or whoever, or the new entrants. Like, it's almost like Autonomy 2.0 that aren't from that kind of original mold of building the maps and doing all this, that this new way can get there more cost effectively and more quickly. Now, the counter arguments to that is like, no, it can't be done. I get it, but we will suspend our criticism until we see how these things play out. And you have a perfect example of that coming up in June with Tesla. And look, I'm using my full self-driving on Tesla. It feels as good as a Waymo in terms of the feel of the ride itself. I'm not going to comment on whether it's as safe on these kind of exclusion areas, but I take my Tesla on a highway and Waymo doesn't in the moment. So, I don't know, but I think there is certainly an opportunity, and there's certainly a lot of companies. And getting back to the conversation we had with the media folk, AI is quickly changing everything and will serve as a potential disruptor across many, many industries, including autonomy. And look, even last week we talked about, is Waymo in trouble in terms of being within a large, kind of slow-moving big tech company that's just living off the free cash flow of Google, Google search, which is it in itself being threatened by LLMs, and that revenue model being threatened. It's not crazy to think that, some of these new entrants that are doing what, maybe Don Burnett and others are doing, can provide as a disruptor. And let's also just keep in mind, whether it's Aurora, whether it's Kodiak, or any of these companies, just because they're focused on trucks today, if that technology works, doesn't mean that they can't take that technology and then license it to an OEM for a vehicle that's not a truck. Yes, I know it's different. Yes, I know the market's big enough to handle it, and maybe they have or haven't said it, but you can't exclude that as a possibility. And I will once again come back to Starlink. as the example of this, where everyone's like, when Starlink was first, oh, Starlink is just delivering service for someone in rural America that needs internet. Then it was like, okay, yes, they can go into suburban America where your connection is bad or unreliable. Then all of a sudden it's on airplanes. And then that was never the original market. And then they're connecting boats. And then they're connecting, moving trailers. So once you get a technology to work in a certain subsegment, the opportunity is to broaden that out based on how the technology works, especially if it's like an end-to-end type solution like AI, where it's not just reliant on some map development.
Kodiak's already done it. They operate on Ford F-150s for the Department of Defense. They operate on Textron tanks. Those are cool, not patent-style tanks, but the Textron tanks. Aurora's done cars. If you look at Aurora, we're gearing up for this moment in history. When this month they're going to pull Drive Around, become a monumental moment that's going to disrupt the industry, very similar way to ChatGPT is disrupting Google search. There's a lot of inbound. Not a day goes by I don't get a text or a call or multiple calls to people. Did Aurora go drive her out yet? Did Aurora go drive her out? Are they going to do it? What's going on? Do we need to start to worry since my phone won't stop ringing with people asking me about this?
Earlier in the month, when we had all of the tariff drama, I kind of encouraged them to wait until the drama, simmer down so you can get the full bang. We didn't have that much drama this week in the grand scheme of things. Yeah, the market has still some shocks of volatility. We're past the midpoint. This was a date, as everyone remembers, was pushed out. You would have think that we're not going to have to wait until April 30th to get this thing done. So I don't know. Maybe we should start to worry, I guess. And then what's the next milestone, Grayson? I mean, is it 10? Is it going to be 10 trucks? Can they, since they were late, maybe revive and bring back, an earlier target where they do 20 trucks? I mean, what's next for them?
To me, is how many runs are you doing, and are you doing on that consistent basis? Is it just, okay, you did Dallas to Houston, you turned off the lights, good night? Or is this thing going back and forth consistently? To me, that's the big metric that we're going to have to watch, because if you read the SEC filings, and I'm going to quote this here, quote unquote, commercial launch. That means uptime, that means runs.
Yeah, commercial launch. But then it's, what is the runs? Are they during the day? Because I think my understanding is like they're not going to operate at night, and they're not going to operate in bad weather, something that Kodiak is already doing. So, and by the way, like, what if let's say Aurora launches, they get 10 or 20 trucks, they go, they deal with weather, they start running those trucks in bad weather and darkness at the end of the year. So those are positive catalysts. But then what happens when you go into 2025? What if Don Burnett announces some deal in Texas on the road with his cars? Like, even if it's not immediate, that hey, we have an order for 5 trucks to deliver by the end of 2025. And the market then looks very different in terms of a company that, at the moment, it might be valued at a couple of $2 billion versus one that's valued at multiples of that, effectively going after the same market with probably a similar number of cars actually, or trucks actually in commercial service. If anything, maybe Kodiak in that case has more. So, I mean, these are all things to consider that I don't necessarily think are on the front and foremost on the minds of broad investors, let alone ones that are at Aurora at the moment, invested in Aurora in the moment.
I'm going to watch cash flow, and I'm going to watch for commercial partnerships that generate cash flow. Let's assume, and I've said this publicly on the Road to Autonomy podcast, and Pete Bigelow agreed with me, same thing, that Aurora goes driver out commercial launch with pack car. When then do you think we should expect to see the Volvo V&L trucks come online?
I mean, we had a great conversation with Volvo down in Texas. It sounds like they really are forward thinking, looking forward to visiting some of their facilities where this technology is getting delivered. I don't know how these things work, but it doesn't feel to me like that is going to be a 2025 event. Maybe in 2026 we see, hopefully, if things go well with Aurora, that they start ramping up the Volvo relationship.
Staying on that theme, we had big news out of Lyft. Lyft's expanding. They're going across the pond to the UK and Europe in a $197 million deal to acquire Freenow. Big move. Why now?
I always love your precision, Grayson. It's not a $200 million deal. It's a $197 million deal. Or when Nuro raised $100 million. It wasn't $100 million. It was $106 million. That you're very specific. I love the attention to detail. The bigger issue is 200 is just not a big number. I think there was some press reports from a couple years back, maybe more, during the COVID era, where Uber was looking, or not looking, but maybe this company was asking for over $1 billion in valuation. I think there was other considerations. So $200 million feels like a steal to get a platform, in Europe that expands the footprint. And the other aspect is it's all taxis, which is fine. But to me, and maybe we're just talking our book here in Autonomy Markets, it feels like you're developing a fleet platform, which autonomy can then layer on top of. And again, if you look at what we've talked about in the United States and Uber's efforts to build fleets as a higher mix of the supply of their cars and controlling that supply, and also driving down the insurance costs of those cars, maybe Lyft is just creating a framework for that future and really shifting the company to be, the partner for autonomy in the ways that they can. So, I think it's a good move. And at $200 million, not much. Let's put this in context. Lyft's market cap is only a couple of $1 billion. It's funny, you have Lyft generating all these rides in the US and some level of profitability that's effectively not far off the valuation that Kodiak's going to get if this thing gets, holds price and at the SPAC level, $10, $11 in terms of a couple of $1 billion of market cap.
Kodiak has a path to being more profitable. When I look at this Lyft deal, and I'm going to give you a little skepticism because there's risk involved. 90% of Freenow's rides were taxis. The founder of Freenow comes out in a statement and says, "We will always be a taxi-first company." That's not why I'm buying you. I'm buying you to expand my platform. Do they have a founder risk emerging with this?
I think you have to put in perspective that this is a European company. So I think what they say publicly about people that are employed to drive taxis is probably matters. So, and this guy now works for another company at the pleasure of that company, although maybe to fire people in Europe is not exactly easy. I don't care what he says. It is, sure, it's taxi first in its fleet, but it's a platform that they can grow additional riders and, again, provide some opportunity for autonomy. The question, though, Grayson, that I have back at you as our China hawk, with Zeekr in the U.S., does Lyft embrace Chinese technology? I mean, after the tariffs, you had Europe talking about opening up trade to China. Here's an opportunity where, this company, as they start to integrate autonomous vehicles, would start buying, Chinese cars. Would Lyft go that route?
100%, because the economics make sense. 100%. And I'll take this one step further. I see a point in the future where on the Lyft network in Europe, they'll be running the Apollo Go, they'll be running Pony AI, will be running on the Lyft network because the Chinese AV companies are expanding to Europe. Furthermore, I want to highlight David Risher was on CNBC. He talked about the Freenow brand eventually going away over time, becoming Lyft. So yes, I do think at some point Chinese electric vehicles and also Chinese autonomous vehicles will be running on the Lyft platform in the European Union. I do not see that happening for the foreseeable future in the UK because we have Brexit, but in the EU, I do.
And there could also be some value here on the tech side, on the supply side, on the fleet management side, meaning that they have FlexDrive in the US, which feels like it's a bit overstated in what they're doing now, but obviously they've got roadmap plans to expand what FlexDrive can do. Maybe there was tech that existed in this company that can now be brought home and integrated into FlexDrive in terms of helping a fleet owner, utilize their platform versus some of the other ones out there. And we've talked about this in past episodes, and can be a new differentiator for Lyft in the market as this market quickly evolves to autonomy.
What it says to me, outside of all this, Lyft's getting aggressive. And on the aggressive front, could we see Lyft potentially export their May Mobility relationship to Europe and start with that?
I'm sure May Mobility would be thrilled about adding additional customers in new markets. And their OEM partner, Toyota, obviously global brand, global partner. So sure, that's certainly a possibility. Although, we can't just tie Lyft at the hip to May Mobility. Both companies, I think, will seek additional partners. May Mobility will seek Uber as a platform partner, and Lyft will seek multiple technology companies as their partner as well.
Staying on the international Uber front, Nuro, which has a 10-year partnership with Uber, is expanding to Japan. The vehicles are starting to arrive in Tokyo to test. Is this the first announcement that we're going to see on Nuro as it relates to an OEM? Because if you're going to test in Japan, I'm thinking, do you have a deal with Honda? Do you have a deal with Mazda? Do you have a deal with Subaru? Perhaps the next announcement is with a Japanese OEM?
I guess I'm a little surprised in terms of the sequencing. Sure, this might mean that you're doing that because you have something in the works, or maybe it's the opposite, which is like you're trying to seed interest from OEMs in that market to a greater extent. What's important, I think, for Nuro is to, as they've made this transition in their overall business model, to find an OEM partner and announce that deal. They've raised capital already, $100 million, $106 million, as you would say, a couple of weeks ago. But I think getting this deal would kind of unlock that ability. The other thing is, what's happening to that legacy dedicated product business, like the R3s, the stuff that was doing food delivery, as opposed to putting a Big Mac in the back of a Toyota. I spent some time with Coco in LA. Right now it's someone's remote driving them. There is I'm sure, a roadmap to get to some level of autonomy there. But more importantly, the product itself, like the delivery vehicle, is just really cheap. So their ability to return a profit on that ends up being shorter, as opposed to having a bunch of technology in a purpose-built, autonomous, higher speed, perhaps, vehicle. Low speed, it's on sidewalks. It seems like an interesting opportunity. There's probably an advertising opportunity that I've seen them take advantage of, where movie studios or Netflix will come and they want to promote it, and they wrap the product. And given the low price of the vehicle and the low price of the delivery fees themselves, because you're only delivering, basically just food items, and I'm sure Uber's not paying them a ton of money for that. Advertising becomes an interesting opportunity to help the overall business model, for sure. But Grayson, you've dealt with a lot of these local towns. Like, how is this? If these vehicles, I guess, or delivery mechanisms are on a bunch of sidewalks, I know that this, the scooter trash that used to exist in a lot of cities, which I think has largely been cleaned up now, are they going to be, more hesitant to enable these little delivery vehicles to operate on sidewalks?
It's the battle over the sidewalk is really what's happening. So there was talk years ago, go off the sidewalk, go into the bike lanes, and the bike mafia had a meltdown. They have a whole coalition of lobbyists. They had a meltdown. Then the bots went back to the sidewalk. On an upcoming episode of The Road to Autonomy, the co-founder and CEO of Swerve Robotics, which is a competitor of Coco, is coming on. So I'll be sure to ask him what his thoughts on that. For the meantime, right now, it's going to come down to a city ordinance. But I believe at this time that they will stay on the sidewalks and probably eventually move into the bike lane, because the bike lanes are completely underutilized. Yes, send me the hate mail. It's a fact. They're underutilized, and they ruin cities. Look what they did to Paris. The bike lanes absolutely ruined that city. It's a shame what the congestion that the bike lanes have cost from a radical mayor. So with that rant said, it's going to come down to local ordinances.
So there's an incentive in that obviously businesses are for it, and they have an impact on the local government. Second, there's probably a revenue share. Like if the town gives you the ability to operate on a sidewalk, they can get a revenue share on the delivery or whatever that's existing there. So I think there's incentive. It's obviously going to depend on the mayor and the population. I guess the question, though, Grayson, is like, if there's multiple competitors in the market, is there a first mover advantage? Like if I go into a small town and say, like, I'm your sidewalk delivery guy, and they say, sure, we get this revenue share, are they going to be forced in any way to also approve the second and third and fourth robot company that perhaps wants to enter that market?
They have to. A city legally cannot pick winners and losers. They legally can't king-make anybody. The city has to be neutral on that. So yes.
So whatever they approve the first guy on, they can. So why wouldn't it be like a franchise? Say, look, we're only going to allow 2 franchises, and then we'll put an RFP out, and whoever bids the most, and however you want to frame that percent of revenue, maybe an actual license fee. Does the model evolve that way?
Could, because then your local civics will tell you that that gives government control over it, and you don't go back to the scooter problem. So I wouldn't be surprised that it's happening in certain municipalities around the country already.
It's hard to turn down some free revenue at the expense of just having a couple of robots deliver products to your local. And look, if it's cheaper to deliver, it helps the local economy. It helps that local restaurateur. And those are very vocal and influential, I think, people in terms of any community.
If you look at vocal, the fake news is vocal.
That's quite a pivot. I love it.
It's a pivot, and it's a true pivot. This week, unconfirmed reports from Reuters, who you can't trust, that Tesla is going to slow down the development of the Cybercab because they're importing parts from China because of the tariffs, and they're going to slow down the Semi. No comment from Mr. Musk and the Tesla stands, the fanboys on X. No comments. Is this just Reuters throwing out more fake news, which they have thrown out consistently against Tesla and Mr. Musk, and Mr. Musk has debunked multiple times, or is there a kernel of truth here?
I mean, I don't know. We're going to have to find soon enough. Hopefully they don't use this as an excuse to not deliver in June. We're about to head into earnings season, and my radar is already going to be up for companies that are going to blame outlook changes on uncertainty around tariffs. I mean, certainly there will be companies definitively impacted by perhaps some companies being frozen in capital investment or moving forward with projects because of uncertainty over tariffs. But when that happens, it's kind of like what I call the El Nino effect. Then if someone's business, if they needed to change their outlook or their guidance, like, oh yeah, it's the tariffs. It's not us. It's not our lack of execution. It's the tariffs. So similarly, I'm cautious is it fake news or is it Tesla leaked news so that they have an excuse on why they're not delivering in June. If I were a betting man, I would just say, like, I think it's probably fake, and that, even if it's 5 or 10 cars, that there's some level of focus at the company and getting the launch in Austin done in June.
The launch is going to happen at some point this week. Mr. Musk came out and posted on X that unsupervised FSD is coming by the end of the year for personally owned Teslas. That's the 3, the Y. Is that a little bit of a hedge there, or is that just Mr. Musk just touting the what he believes?
Yeah, I think it's what he believes. So we'll see if that actually happens. And I think there's plenty of documentation that people have on what he said and believes, and then what actually happens.
What he says and believes, I got to give a shout out to Lightshed. You published the most interesting piece of data. The Great Quarters Guys chart. I can't stand it. You can't stand it. Where can our viewers and listeners go see the chart that Lightshed publishes every single earnings season? Tell us.
What Grayson is referring to is during earnings season, and I spend hours and hours and hours listening to management teams. And part of these earnings calls are analysts that ask questions. And rather than asking the tough questions that get us the answers that we need, they're more interested in just telling the management team what great jobs they're doing so that they can hear themselves speak, and for everyone to hear them speak on these conference calls every week. So, yes, it's very frustrating.
You're going to make that public on X so everybody can check it out?
No, that is proprietary information for Lightshed subscribers only. But yeah, sometimes we'll highlight certain firms that are a little bit more great quartery than others.
So if you're institutional, go email team@Lightshed and sign up for the research. It's great. I read it. I enjoy it. It's really well done. Things that I don't get, staying on the Great Quarter Guys, the things I don't get. Waymo puts out an announcement this week. Guess what? The Uber waitlist is open. Who cares? Why is that such a big deal? Why don't you just announce that you don't need a waitlist? It's open.
Yeah, whatever. I think it's any milestone that you can provide. And I think this is just kind of that marketing. There's probably just a middle manager marketing person in there that said, like, this is our playbook. How do we develop, like, people in Atlanta may not have traveled to San Francisco or LA and experienced the magic of being in a Waymo. So this is just trying to build up that anticipation. They're putting the red velvet rope in. Now, Grayson, do you stand in line when you see the red velvet rope? Because those are the last places I want to go. Or are you the guy in line waiting to get into that club?
I don't go to clubs. When I do go to joints, either I know the owner and I don't wait in line, or I go somewhere else. I'm too old for that crap.
Exactly. But I think that's all. I think that's all it is. It's marketing.
20% of all Uber rides in Austin were Waymo. I said it on the newsletter. I'm saying it now. That's factually incorrect. Well, here comes a second city, Atlanta. How long until we get Yipit data that lets investors say Waymo needs Uber and this narrative can just continue to proliferate?
I kind of enjoy when this data comes out. For our clients pay for a variety of different data sources, and it's always good to have more data, and you just have to put it in context. And if it impacts others' belief system, that's good because that creates inefficiencies in the market as an investor that you can make money off of.
I want to know the real excuse from Waymo is when you look at the Atlanta ODD, it stopped 6 miles before the Atlanta airport. That's a mistake. They got to get to that airport to truly unlock usability in Atlanta.
Yeah, I mean, who cares though, Grayson? Like, first of all, yeah, I 100% agree. But like, we know the issue. They just need to get on the highways. It's okay. They'll get there. Like, it's close. It's San Francisco. It's LA. It's all these markets. They will get to the airports. Obviously, there's some negotiation that has to occur. And I think there was some progress on that front in California in terms of physically getting to the airport. What do we have on that front?
Waymo's now able to operate at private airports, the Santa Monica Airport and the Palo Alto Airport. So you fly your private jet into California, land at one of those two airports, you get picked up at a Waymo. Step forward, not the commercial platforms, but a step forward. So the airport unlock is coming. That's clear evidence that Waymo is interested in it. Well, we had a jam-packed week in autonomy this week. Lots of big news, international expansions, companies going public. What do we need to look for in the autonomy markets next week?
This is a big week coming up. You have Tesla reporting. You have, I believe, Mobileye reporting. Aurora is another week closer to the end of the month. So hopefully we hear something out of Aurora sooner rather than later. I mean, if earnings start Tuesday, do you really want to be announcing that in the middle of when other companies are reporting earnings? I mean, get it out. Let's get it done. So, yeah, I mean, I think it should be a busy week.
I would say this. Get it done. And when we have the Tesla earnings call, the number one most upvoted question in Robotaxi, I'm going to read this for a while. This is hilarious, that they want answered. And Mr. Musk, I hope he answers this. And I'm going to quote this. If a Robotaxi gets stuck, can the passenger help the vehicle get out by drawing a path on the screen or control the vehicle in a slow speed using an on-screen joystick, end quote. That's a crazy idea. Do you think we're going to get any comment on the Tesla earnings call about that?
I definitely don't think you want a Cybertruck user driving with a on-screen joystick. That completely defeats the purpose of autonomy. In terms of drawing a path, sure. I mean, that's what the safety drivers would do for Waymo. But again, like, do you want the person driving a line like into the side of a building? Again, I don't think you necessarily want to put that in the hands of the driver. I mean, it really begs the question. Maybe the question gets asked and we get some answer from Elon whether they're going to have, people that can kind of tap into these cars and drive them when they get into precarious situations. Or we can probably just have Elon with his typical response, well, our cars are so perfect, they're never going to need that. They're always going to know what the right thing to do is. So we'll find out on Tuesday.
We will find out. And if they did let the people draw a path, you have a liability issue there because you could be high, you could be drunk, and anything you want, or you're not paying attention. So you do have liability issues, and that opens up a whole new can of worms. But each and every week, we're going to be here to break it down for our audience every Saturday, 10 a.m. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is scaling commercial autonomous operations. Walt, until next week.